I just, want to first of all say thank you, Jeff and Nichole, for being here. We appreciate both of you. Appreciate the work that you're doing and your forward thinking that we at the Learning Council have had the pleasure of watching over the last several years. But the first question we want to kind of talk through is about student centricity and the focus on effective learning. It's a talking point when it comes to the why for digital transition. What excites you about the potential of refocusing on the student and effective instruction these days?
Sure. Should we do paper, rock, scissors? I can start.
I'll yield.
Yield. The part that excites me most about student-centric education is truly that why isn't education student-centric? Isn't that the intent? The intent is that we are there for the students. We say that all the time. Well, I'm here for the students while I'm educating for the students. I do this job not because I get paid well for it, but because I love the students. I have a passion for teaching the students. I love the aha moment. Those are all things that we say all the time. But the construct of how our education system has been set up hasn't been student-centric. It hasn't been focused on what does this learner need to find success. It's been set up on all of these content pieces are the pieces that I need to impart upon that child. And because I have imparted it upon that child, they are going to be successful in the world. And there are examples that I've heard all day long and in every conversation I've ever had about any of this that has said, I have this experience personally, or I have these children, my own children, and they have this experience. Or Leilani referred earlier to an example I have with my own dad who had experiences. And all of those negative experiences or unsuccessful moments have been a direct result of a lack of student-centric thinking. That people weren't directly thinking about what that child needed or that student needed to find success, because intrinsically, I think we can all agree that every single person is born with an interest of learning. Every child is born with grit. You watch a child learn how to walk, and man, they're the most grit-filled people in the entire world. But because of the system that we have, we actually strip that grit out of our students. We actually strip that determination out of them by saying, oh, yep, you got that. Or, nope, you didn't. Well, we're going to move on. Too bad. And leave it. So I think the excitement for me is really that we're doing what we're saying we're doing by moving to a student-centric view of education, that we're claimed it for a long time, and now we're actually adopting it. We're actually doing what we're saying we're doing.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard to follow up on. But I would just say in my role, I get the privilege of getting out and seeing a lot of educators. I interact a lot with the public, kind of many people seeking different options for their kids. Mm-hmm. And there is fantastic work happening. Teachers do care about their children. Mm-hmm. They do know their kids, and they do try to do what's best for them. I also agree with the notion that what we've done for too long is we've tried to provide something for the middle, I guess. That concept of trying to, for us to guess what's best for each community, each family, each child, and deliver a standardized set of content for them. Some of the exciting work that I see with personalized learning is really that just reconnecting and starting with the student and their family, and figuring out what they really aspire to, mm-hmm. and being able to support them along the way. So I think that has the potential to be a game changer, but unfortunately we have this entire system, which I'm part of, I'll own that, that is really built around those ideas of keeping the system going, mm-hmm. honestly. And I would say, you know, the other systems that we have in place, like Leilani refers to capitalism a lot in business, those are systems that are that have profited from, you know, the inequities and the structures that we have in place today, and they perpetuate them too. So we have a lot of work to do that as a society, and it's not just a simple education fix, and certainly not just a simple ed tech fix.
So we'll build on that by asking both of you, what's the most important work you or your organization is doing right now? Is it policy related, pedagogy related, professional development, mentoring, coaching, stepping back and rethinking things?
Well, I'll take that on.
Okay.
So I work in the Career and College Success Division at the Department of Education, and we've recently, we're in the middle of some work that we've done with stakeholders to create a vision for career and college readiness and a suite of resources that goes with that. You can find it on our website. It's been published. It might be the best kept secret in education in Minnesota because we don't have enough people adopting it and using it yet. But really, it's that idea of really thinking about career and college success for every single student and defining what that means. We have domains, 4 domains with competencies under each one, which include a social emotional learning domain. That I think I'm really proud of that, and then I really think it can help us move things forward. So I would say that, along with our work that other people in the agency and other organizations are doing around equity, is the most important work right now.
I struggle with the absolute phrase of most important. So I'm going to kind of go with some of the important work that we're doing right now, is that stepping back, that taking the moment to say, okay, we had this mission and vision put into place. We made the right gains that we wanted to make in those. We implemented a new set of programs to support us. We put some of that foundation into place. And right now in real time, I think some of the most important work that we're doing is taking that moment to, okay, we did kind of phase 1. Now let's reassess, that monitor and adjust that we all, again, know is good practice in education. And I think that honoring that as a system and saying, okay, we got there. Now we have to see where our learners are at. And I, as a member of the instructional team, have been pushing our team to refer to our education staff as our learners. Because one of the biggest things that we realized was we weren't maybe always honoring them as our learners that are coming to us in a huge gamut of experiences with their own baggage and their own buckets of skills and skill gaps. And taking that moment in our time, in real time, to say, are we reaching our learners through our strategic plan, through the plan that we have in place? We're working with Leilani on Invistory and going back and stopping and saying, okay, what apps and programs are we doing within our district, and how are they effective and how are they not effective, and talking to our learners, both our staff learners as well as our student learners, and saying, are they being reached, and are we hitting all the places? Dreambox is one that I used in my own, some of their research, I used in my own master's thesis, and I go back to some of the stuff that they've done and I say, wow, that really hits home to some of the stuff that we're doing in real time. And some of the Z-Space stuff, it's exploring those other options that are out there in a very honest and real way of saying, what are we doing? What do we have that's good? What do we have that can be gotten rid of? And then where do we need to fill in those gaps? So right now it's kind of that professional development, but it's also that stepping back and really analyzing our integrity of the process as well.
So when I follow up and ask, how did you get there to understand that? You know, where was the aha moment that said, wait a minute, we didn't, you know, do this the way we should have done it to be more effective? Was there a trigger around that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was. I think the most glaring one that I can share very specifically was we got back from the National Learning Council last year, and I had read the 17 Big Ideas a couple of times through, and at that gathering we kind of had done it with our superintendent and our elementary school principal who was at that gathering, and we went back and we said, you know, I'm kind of curious what our teachers think of these things. Like, where do you think they're at? Because we as a team were all on the same page about them. And we were like, yeah, we get that this is where education is going. Yeah, this is not surprising to any of us. And so we did an activity for it was kind of pseudo PLC type time, and pushed out the article. And then I pushed out an assignment on Schoology and just said, tell us your thoughts as a group. Discuss each one of these 17 big ideas, and then come back and tell us your thoughts about them. And it was incredibly eye-opening, the responses that we got to those 17 big ideas, and how varied those responses were, and how varied the understanding of the future of education was compared to ours as an instructional team. Mm-hmm. We have an extremely supportive school board, who is also, I would say, some of the most forefront school board members I've ever met in education, who were also at the same place as our instructional admin team. And we realized that skill gap, that deficit of understanding, was within our learners. As an instructional admin team, they are our learners, and we got that information out of that activity, and we kind of did the stop, back up a little bit, let's go back and hit some of these understandings. So really it was the proverbial why hadn't been effectively communicated and understood and owned. And those are all each things, because maybe we thought we had communicated it, but we didn't effectively make sure it was understood and owned by our entire staff. And so some of the implementation that we were doing wasn't effective because they weren't owning that same why as what we were as a staff of an instructional team in our school board. Mr. Hoppel is here, who happened to be the leader.
There was an interim superintendent. I figured this has got to get done in 1 year, and push things through maybe a little too fast, but it was fun anyway.
Oh. And we've owned some of that as well. The timing thing, and we've as a team really done a lot of reflection on what is our pace, and does our pace match our learners? Our pace maybe matched our intent and our desires, but did it match our learners? And I mean, if you study anything on personalization, well, man, we missed the mark on that one, because pace is number one in there, you know, of our top three. So it's that recognizing that we as a team had to recognize them as our learners.
And so, Jeff, I'll go back and ask you, you've been big on the social emotional piece as long as we've known you. I don't ever think I've heard you kind of talk about that trigger moment where it just kind of went aha with you that led you down this path to do all this work. Any thoughts on that? Why you think this is the thing that's kind of been your passion about it?
Well, it's a long story, and I'm not gonna take the whole time to talk about it today, but I'll just try to summarize it. So, starting as a tech forward teacher, and then evolving into becoming a tech integration coach, and then eventually moving into my work at the Department of Education, I went through the natural evolution of doing, let's pick the new cool app, let's focus on engagement and excitement, to, evolving to look at depth, lasting learning, making meaning. And I think I matured a lot as a human to understand, learning in humanity and the broader scope in which we all exist too. And I a lot of times I'm kind of hesitant because I feel like I'm almost anti-technology, but I'm the online and digital learning specialist, which is kind of a weird line to walk.
Hear, hear.
But I've really come to appreciate intentional use of technology and digital learning. And really, I think it was probably more than anything my work as with adult learners as a digital literacy coach that helped me realize that if you're talking about changing, getting people to change their practice, changing their pedagogy, the way that they teach, there's a give and take there, right? Like something's lost and something is gained, and you have to, take them through that journey of, well, if you're going to flip your classroom, for example, and you're going to, start recording your lectures on video, a lot of people would focus on how do we make the video? How do we make these awesome videos? But I figured out in that work that what I really needed to do is help them understand the human element, because now I'm not going to lecture during that lesson time. I have that lesson time open. So how am I going to interact with those students? So that's really kind of, where I got to, that realizing the best tech integration is really understanding how to implement it and how to be human. Another piece of that, is, I always harp on equity and the system that we exist in, and realizing that these apps are coded by humans, all of the software is coded by humans, those humans have biases. And so, just thinking about the algorithms that are programmed into some of these applications that say, it's time for you to move on and you're going to move on in this direction, we should always not question that or be skeptical about it, but always, combine that with the human aspect of the teacher.
Very good. Thank you. So there are a lot of hot buzzwords in education right now. Social emotional learning, personalized, specialized professional development, understanding digital instruction design, administrative redesign, AR, VR. Any thoughts on any of these?
Why don't we go down the list?
I was going to say.
Should we do that?
Well.
That's a lot.
Or maybe if you
That's
had
a
to
lot.
pick one promising thing that's out there that you're watching, excited about.
I'll take a swing first. In my opinion, without being able to read that list specifically back to you, I think that the concept, more than the term, is that we are personalizing. I think in all of those circumstances, we are personalizing by understanding that student-centric. If we go back to the first question, we are recognizing that each one of our learners is a person, and they have the social emotional uniqueness. They have their own interests and skills and skill gaps. And that as we, and I don't mean personalization as a definition, but as a concept, I think that as we move forward with all of these, the VR and the augmented reality and all of those things, they all go back to that student-centric opportunity to move education in a way that we honor all of the whole of the person. Because one of the conversations we were having at our table just minutes ago was, if they aren't open to that learning, you can be the most engaging, amazing educator with the best lesson you've ever delivered. But if they are closed to that learning opportunity, nothing that you do is going to open that opportunity up, that door up. And I think that all of the things that you just listed are all different ways that we engage the student autonomy into opening up their doors to allow those learning experiences to reach in. And so I just continuously go back to, are we interpreting them and their needs, or are we applying our perception of their needs? Are we going in to understand their social emotional state while sitting in their classroom to understand what door needs to be opened today? Am I engaging with them in a way that allows them the security and the safety of sitting where they are today in opening up and engaging? You know, we go back to all sorts of hierarchies of needs. And sometimes I think in education, we do that preach versus application. We understand they need to feel safe in their environment, but are we, by virtue of what we're presenting to them, helping them to feel engaged in their own right with their own authentic self?
Yeah, that's interesting. I would agree with you. You know, I think, you know, some of the exciting conversations that I've been having with districts and schools in Minnesota around personalized learning, I think the challenge is like knowing what people are talking about, like when they call you and ask about personalized learning, or you're in a conversation, because it can mean so many different things, right? Like it can mean, you know, we're just going to tweak it and give some students a choice of this app over that app, or whatever. But true personalization, if you think about it, like requires us to abandon a lot of those systemic structures that we have, which people in general, I would say, are really finding it hard to do. So I think, you know, the first thing is, let's be clear on our terms and let's be clear on what we mean. The other thing that I would say to personalized learning that kind of concerns me, again, this is maybe more with my parent hat on, but like, human teachers are super important to help students reveal themselves and their own truth and their own interests and their own aptitudes. I don't think that necessarily comes from inside of a person who is raised in isolation. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
So I think, you know, if we're talking about personalizing, it's not without guidance, without support, without helping students realize that there is this career path, or you have that interest. Oh, I had that interest too, right? It's that kind of connection. We've got to understand the role of scaffolding in that kind of development. Like, you know, expecting a third grader to be able to make a choice about how they want to learn a math concept, right? May not be the best.
We still need the
or
guide.
Whether they want to do math at all,
Yeah,
right?
Like, we still need the guide.
So
we
there's got to
be
be
standards.
Yeah, there's got to be guidance there and guide rails, and I still believe, you know, that human experience through teachers helping develop those interests and those passions is critical. And I think about, you know, our students don't have one story. They all have very unique stories and very unique pressures that a lot of times we don't realize. One of the things that I kind of think of often, almost in a guilty way, is when I used to plan lessons or think about some kind of approach that I was going to advocate for with teachers, I had like the ideal student in mind, right? So like, who is your ideal student? I mean, I'm thinking about the slide that we saw that looked like the Game of Life board, right? Where the kid is going to social emotional camp. How many students in this neighborhood are going to go to social emotional camp, right? Like, so we've got to keep that in mind, right? So we've got all kinds of learners in our community, and we owe it to them to support them all.
And we meet all those needs. If I can just quickly add on, that's one of the other things that of personalization, as we've been working on it within our district, was that is the top misconception that we needed to try to inform our teachers about, was that as we were personalizing, they felt it was going to be all willy-nilly, all free will, and the kids were going to do whatever they wanted to do, and who needs standards, and how are we going to test them anyway, because they're not learning anything, because they're going to just get to pick. And that has been the greatest amount of conversation that we have centered our conversation around in our district is, no. You are still an integral part of this process of education. But the way you're applying it looks slightly different. But we still have standards, we still have learning targets, we still have proficiency scales, we still have intentional education. We're just doing it in an intentionally different way. And that, I agree, I have seen, and I've had many conversations with people where a student has gone, and this is not a slam on our online schools, but a student who thinks that their world is going to be solved by going to an online school goes because they're going to be able to do everything that they want and still learn, and they come back to the brick and mortar school because their idea of what their experience was going to be like in that way didn't fit their actual learning needs. And so I like that you brought that up, because that has been another one of our major misconceptions amongst our learners, our staff learners. Because, man, what we do and the human interactions that we have, that's what makes us invaluable.
Yeah.
That's why the brick and mortar school isn't going to fall down as long as we harness that power.
Yeah. And, you know, speaking of our learners as well, like we talked a lot in our table groups about our learners, including our parents, right? The parents are a huge community of learners that we have the opportunity to influence. But I think, you know, with all the other 10,000 things happening, right? Like, how much can you do to get them understanding this? But I think a lot of times, you know, even less than the teachers, we think about educating the parents.
So one thing I know about both of you have had experience internationally with education, and just want to ask for a quick input on, because not many people do go somewhere outside of the United States to experience teaching there, but how has that impacted you in your career versus had you not had that experience, do you think?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start. I guess for me, it made me appreciate a lot of things about being in America. So my first overseas experience was teaching in England, and then after that I moved to Germany. And in Germany, I don't know if you understand what the education system is like. England, it's kind of the same way, but you're dealing with students who are kind of like at the age of a sophomore, where they're put into a vocational track or a college prep track. But even before that, like, the conversation is ever present between the parents and the child of like, this is what you're going to be. And that, like, that's something I never really realized until I moved overseas, that like, you always think about that, like every American can grow up to be president.
Doctors, lawyers, and presidents.
Exactly, but it's real and it's unique. I think it's unique to us. It causes a lot of mess, I think, in our system, because that's kind of how we're built. We're built to give everybody that opportunity. But I think it's something that's very unique. The other thing that I would say about that was the inclusion that we have here, and now maybe more so than ever, the diversity of students in one class is something that I didn't see a lot in the experiences that I had abroad.
So my experience was I did my student teaching in New Zealand, and as a result, some of my teacher prep things as I came back was a little skewed compared to some of the Americans who had teacher prep here. And some of the pieces that I experienced there was some ability tracking kind of things. One of the things that I took away was this kind of idea of finding the education that fits you. Because in New Zealand, they have compulsory education laws, but it's on the onus of the parent, not on the onus of the school district. So there are schools in the area, and then the parents are responsible for finding the right fit for their student. And if they are in a school where it's not fitting, you pull them there and you put them over here, and you find that fit. It also gives the school some ability to apply a certain type of philosophy in a different way. To be completely honest, I can argue the pro and con from every difference that I can name from my experience there. I see pros to a lot of things that a lot of people think here are taboo subjects, because I saw them in an applicable way where I could see the positives of some of those things. I can also tell you a lot of cons, and I can go right down a list. But what it did for me as an educator is it opened my mind to the creativity that can be applied to the process of education. There is no one right or wrong way in education. And because of my experience abroad and the type of common assessments that were national common assessments, and everybody took that, and I know Germany's the same way on that, there was this collaboration that happened in a level that doesn't happen with our teaching staff, and there is a level of conversation and development that happens because of those. Also, again, I can argue the pro and the con of some of those conversations, but that experience for me professionally, most and more than anything else, just opened my own worldview of education, and the world of education is so limitless, and the possibilities and the potentials of the way that we can do things can be so creatively done.
And I'll just add another thing that was really well said. I think I'm trying to not think about solving a problem almost anymore. Like education is a problem to be solved, like we're going to, which implies that there is a solution.
Yeah.
Like I think educating humans is probably the most difficult, complex task that
Agreed.
there is. And it sort of goes back to what you said as well about feeling that guilt of not doing things right versus celebrating the growth that we're doing. I really appreciate that reframing because it's helping me understand that this is not a problem. This is an opportunity that we have.
Yes.
And it's one that is going to keep bothering us. We need the smartest minds to work on it. We all have to put as much energy as we can muster every day behind it. But it's probably not something that we're going to get to the point and be like, oh, if only that app would have been there 10 years ago, because we could have done this.
There's no done.
Yeah, there is no done.
There's no we have achieved.
Well, thank you both. Very interesting conversation. And so would anybody have any questions for Jeff or Nichole from the audience? No? Lonnie?
I have a billion questions, but I think we're all, that was such a good high note.
Yeah.
I just want to
End it there?
vibe on that.
As well as, I hope, so thank you both, Jeff and Nichole. We really appreciate it. Let's give them a round of applause.